Experts warn that it's time to take space storms seriously. Severe solar storm has potential to disable telecommunications and power grids. Space weather could pose serious problems here on Earth in the coming years, the chief of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has said. A severe solar storm has the potential to take down telecommunications and power grids, and the country needs to work on being better prepared, said the NOAA administrator at the annual meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. She is also the U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere. This is not a matter of if, it's simply a matter of when and how big, she said of the potential for a dangerous solar flare. We have every reason to expect we're going to be seeing more space weather in the coming years, and it behooves us to be smart and be prepared. Ramping up, the space weather threat is becoming more dire as our sun ramps up towards its period of solar maximum, predicted for around 2013. Activity on the sun fluctuates on a roughly 11-year cycle, and our star has been relatively dormant for a while. That's clearly starting to change, though, as evidenced by a Class X solar flare, the strongest kind that erupted from the sun February 14th. I think the events of this week certainly underscore how important it is for us to be paying attention to space weather and to be prepared to respond to and mitigate potential impacts, the administrator said. As we enter into a period of enhanced solar activity, it seems pretty clear that we are going to be looking at the possibility of not only more solar events, but also the possibility of some very strong events. The February 14th flare unleashed a wave of charged particles that streamed immediately toward Earth, as well as coronal mass ejections, or blobs of plasma that took days to arrive here. When they did, they interacted with Earth's magnetic field to cause geomagnetic storms that wiped out radio communications in the western Pacific Ocean and parts of Asia, and caused airlines to reroute some polar flights to avoid radio outages. But next time could be worse. However, experts say we got off fairly lucky with this recent solar storm, and that future eruptions could cause worse damage, particularly to the sensitive transformers and capacitors and power grids. If some of these were harmed, there could be power outages for days, weeks, months, or even, in the case of severe damage, years, experts warned. And that would be very catastrophic to human societies. It turned out that we were quite well protected this time, so not much happened, said a European Space Agency scientist. In another case, things might have been different. Space weather hasn't posed quite such a threat before, because during the last solar maximum, around 10 years ago, the world wasn't as dependent on satellite telecommunications, cell phones, and global positioning system, GPS, all technologies that could be disrupted by solar flares. Many things we take for granted today are so much more prone to the effects of space weather than was the case during the last maximum. The problem is likely to get even worse, as the world could likely become more technologically dependent by the time the next solar maximum rolls around, and the next. Slightly scary. Other experts agree that the risk must be addressed. It is slightly scary, and I think properly so, said John Beddington, the UK government's chief scientific advisor. We've got to be scared by these events, otherwise we will not take them seriously. He and other European officials said the world needs greater international cooperation to meet the threat of dangerous space weather. There are few emergency scenarios today that require such close cooperation across the Atlantic as a geomagnetic storm, said Helena Lindberg, Director General for the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency, MSB. We have an urgent need to start sharing expertise and connecting our systems for warning and for response, Lindbergh said. This cooperation has to be put in place before a disaster hits. So, in other words, it's time to prepare for these solar storms before they happen. Much more work needs to be done to improve our ability to forecast solar storms in advance, equip more satellites with radiation shielding, and fortify power grids with resilient transformers and capacitors. It's much better to be prepared for these kind of things before they happen, not after. And this too is another sign of the times, the end times, transition days, which is a time of extraordinary changes happening all around the world. Everything that must change quickly or rapidly, and for the better, because it's about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations. Revelation chapter 8, verse 10. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. 11. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many humans died of the waters, because they were made bitter. 12. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. 13. And I beheld, and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels, which are yet to sound. Revelation chapter 16, verse 8. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch humans with fire. 9. And humans were scorched with great heat, and blasphemed the name of God, which has power over these plagues, and they repented not to give him glory. Yes, it's time. It's time for all prophecy to be fulfilled. And these are more signs happening daily all around the world. The fourth angel comes quickly.